There is a specific kind of exhaustion that doesn't show up on any medical chart. It doesn't have a name most doctors would recognize. It's not insomnia exactly, though you may not sleep well. It's not depression exactly, though it can feel like a heavy fog some mornings. It is the exhaustion that comes from spending your entire life feeling everything. Everyone else's grief, everyone else's anxiety, everyone else's unspoken loneliness, as deeply as if it were your own. And here's the part that nobody warned you about. The people who carry this kind of tiredness are often the ones everyone else leans on. You are the person others call at midnight. You are the one who notices when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes. You are the one who stays a little longer, gives a little more, and absorbs the emotional weather of every single room you walk into. And somehow, after all of that, you still find a way to ask, am I doing enough? Welcome. If that landed somewhere in your chest, this episode is for you. Today we're talking about something that I believe is one of the most misunderstood psychological gifts that exists in human beings. We call it empathy. But what we've been taught about it, what we've been told it means, and especially what we've been told to do with it, most of that has been wrong. Or at least, it's been dangerously incomplete. Because there is a superpower buried inside your sensitivity that you have almost certainly never been told about. And not only has no one named it for you, but the way you've been living, the way you've been trained to show up in the world, has likely been quietly working against it your entire life. So let's start with what you already know about yourself. You feel things deeply. Not just your own feelings, but other people's feelings. You walk into a room and within minutes you've picked up on the tension between two people who haven't spoken about it yet. You can hear the sadness underneath someone's joke. You can tell when someone says, "I'm fine," and means the exact opposite. You pick up emotional frequencies the way some people pick up radio signals, constantly, automatically, and often without any control over it. And for most of your life, this ability has felt less like a gift and more like a burden you were given without a manual. People have probably told you that you're too sensitive, that you take things too personally, that you need to toughen up, build thicker skin, stop letting things get to you so much. And here is what happens to a deeply empathetic person who hears that message enough times. You start to believe it. You start to treat your sensitivity like a problem to be managed instead of a power to be understood. You learn to apologize for feeling too much. You learn to shrink. And shrinking, for an empath, is one of the most devastating things that can happen, because it doesn't just dim you, it disconnects you from the very thing that makes you extraordinary. But here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. What if your sensitivity isn't a flaw in your design? What if it's actually a feature, one so advanced that most people don't even have access to it? Psychological research on highly sensitive people, a term coined by Dr. Elaine Aron in the 1990s, suggests that roughly 15 to 20% of the population is born with a nervous system that processes sensory and emotional information at a significantly deeper level than the rest of the population. Not better or worse, just deeper. More layers, more texture, more nuance. These individuals notice subtleties others miss entirely. They process experiences more thoroughly. They are, in a very real neurological sense, running more complex emotional software than the average person. And here's where it gets fascinating. Because that processing capacity, that depth, isn't just about feeling. It is about perceiving. Really, truly, accurately perceiving the world in ways that most people cannot. The hidden superpower we're talking about today is this. Empaths have an almost supernatural capacity for pattern recognition in human behavior. Not just emotional sensitivity, but actual data-rich insight into who people are, what they need, what they're hiding, what they're afraid of, and what they're capable of. You are, in the most non-woo way I can describe it, a human lie detector, a behavioral analyst, and an emotional cartographer all at once. You have been mapping the inner worlds of people around you your entire life. You have been gathering information, filing it, cross-referencing it in real time about every person you have ever loved or worked with or sat next to on a bus. Think about that. Really think about it. You have been doing this for decades. And what have you done with all of that intelligence? If you're like most empaths, you have been using it almost entirely in service of other people. To soothe them, to help them, to make them comfortable, to anticipate their needs before they even know what those needs are. You have been running a sophisticated intelligence operation and handing over the intelligence to everyone else while leaving yourself with nothing. This is the thing no one talks about. Not the sensitivity itself, that part gets mentioned, but the way empaths systematically underuse their perception in their own lives. Let me give you an example. You probably knew, long before the relationship ended, that it wasn't working. You felt it. Something was off in how he looked at you, in the slight flatness in her voice, in the way the room felt when you walked in. You had data, real, accurate, reliable data. But what did you do with it? Most empaths will tell me some version of the same story. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was projecting.
I second-guessed myself.
I gave the benefit of the doubt again and again and again. I explained away what I felt until I had no explanation left and the damage was already done. You did not have a perception problem. You had a trust problem. You stopped trusting the most accurate instrument you possess, yourself. And this is where we need to talk about something uncomfortable, because I promised you a bold truth alongside the warmth, and here it is. Empaths are, statistically and anecdotally, some of the most consistent self-betrayers on the planet. Not because you're weak, not because you're naive, but because you have been taught, over and over, by family systems and relationships and a culture that rewards self-sacrifice, that your feelings are less important than other people's comfort. That your perception is self-centered when used for your own protection. That needing something makes you a burden. And so you've learned to distrust the very intelligence that was supposed to protect you. Your superpower has been running on mute, and you've been the one muting it. Here is another layer to this that I think is deeply important. Empaths don't just feel emotions, they metabolize them. When someone brings you their pain, you don't just witness it, you process it, you turn it over, you sit with it, you work on it, you try to alchemize it into something that makes that person feel better. This is a profound and beautiful capacity. It is also, without the right boundaries, a recipe for becoming what some psychologists call an emotional landfill, a place where everyone deposits what they can't carry, and no one asks if you're doing okay under the weight. The question is not whether you have this capacity, you do. The question is whether you have been selective about how and where you use it. Think about the most draining relationships in your life, the ones where you walk away feeling like a hollow shell. I would guess that in most of those relationships, there is a pattern of asymmetry. You are the processor. You are the one doing the emotional heavy lifting. The other person may not even be consciously aware of what they're taking, because people who have not developed emotional intelligence often do not know what they are drawing from. They simply know they feel better when they're around you, and you simply know that you feel emptied. This is not a character flaw in you, but it is something you need to look at clearly. Because one of the most damaging myths about empaths is that loving someone deeply means absorbing their pain unconditionally and indefinitely. It does not. Unconditional love does not mean unconditional access. These are two completely different things, and conflating them has cost you more than you probably realize. Real love, healthy love, including the kind you deserve to give and receive, has a structure. It has reciprocity. It has space for both people's emotional realities to exist. And here's what your sensitivity actually makes you capable of, if you let it. You are one of the rare human beings who can build truly profound, deeply honest, emotionally sophisticated relationships. Not just warm ones, but real ones. Ones where both people are fully present and fully known. That is the actual dream your empathy has been reaching for this whole time. Not to carry everyone, but to truly connect with someone. But you cannot do that if you continue to make yourself invisible in the name of being needed. Let's talk about something called the fawn response, because I think a lot of empaths have been living inside it for so long, it feels like personality rather than protection. The fawn response is a trauma-informed concept that describes a pattern where, in the face of conflict or potential disapproval, a person instinctively moves toward appeasement. They smooth things over. They take responsibility for other people's discomfort. They make themselves agreeable, small, easy, low maintenance. They prioritize the other person's emotional state above their own, because at some point in their life, this was the safest strategy available to them. Does any of that sound familiar? For many empaths, this pattern began very early. Maybe you grew up in a home where someone's emotions were unpredictable. And your sensitivity meant you were always tracking the emotional temperature, always trying to prevent the storm. Maybe you learned that your feelings created problems, that being too much was dangerous. Maybe you were the peacemaker in your family, the one who held everything together, the one everyone else looked to for stability. And you were so good at it. You were praised for it. So you kept going, and going, and going, until being helpful became your identity, and being helped became foreign, almost frightening. This is not who you are. This is what you learned. And there is a profound difference between the two. Who you actually are is someone with an extraordinary capacity for attunement, for depth, for insight, for presence. Someone who can hold space for complexity, for contradiction, for the full spectrum of human emotion without flinching. Someone whose perception is a legitimate superpower when it is aimed not just outward but inward, at your own life, your own needs, your own truth. The hardest and most important work for an empath is learning to direct that same quality of attention toward yourself. To feel into what you actually need, not what would be easier for everyone else. To notice your own emotional weather with the same care you give to everyone else's. To take your own perception seriously, especially when it's telling you that something is wrong, that a relationship is costing you too much, that a situation is not what it appears to be, that you deserve more than you have been accepting. You trust your gut about everyone else. It's time to start trusting it about your own life. And here's the thing about that hidden superpower, the pattern recognition, the deep perception. When an empath finally begins to use it in service of themselves, something remarkable happens. You stop ending up in the same exhausting dynamics. You start recognizing the early signs of an emotionally unavailable person before you've given them 3 years of your energy. You start noticing when a situation is activating your fawn response rather than your genuine desire to help. You start choosing with clarity instead of compulsion. You move from reactive to intentional. And your relationships don't just improve, they transform. Because you stop settling for being a resource and start showing up as a whole person. This is what your sensitivity was always pointing toward. Not martyrdom, not endless giving, not being the one who holds everyone else up while quietly falling apart. It was pointing toward genuine connection, deep, honest, chosen connection, the kind that actually fills you up instead of emptying you out. I want to leave you with something that I hope stays with you long after this episode ends. You have spent so much of your life worrying about whether you are too much, too sensitive, too intense, too emotional, too needy. I want you to consider, just for today, the other possibility. What if you are not too much? What if the people who told you that were people who had too little capacity to hold what you were offering? What if your depth was never the problem? What if the only problem has ever been that you were placed in spaces that were too shallow for everything you carry? Your empathy is not a liability. It is a form of intelligence that the world desperately needs. But the world, and more importantly you, needs you to stop pouring it into containers that were never meant to hold you. You need people and places and relationships that can actually meet you where you are. And finding those, building those, protecting those, that is not selfish. That is not too much to ask. That is the whole point. The superpower was never just about feeling. It was always about knowing. Knowing people deeply, knowing the truth beneath the surface, knowing what is real and what is performance, what is love and what is need, what is connection and what is consumption. You already know. You have always known. The only question left is whether you are finally ready to trust it. Start there. Just start there. That is enough for today.